One of the dangers is the more we practice, the longer we practice, we gain more knowledge, more experience, we might gain more skill in meditation, we get some samadhi and peace. If we've never developed this sense of respect and deference for the teacher and for the Vinaya, and as we gain the knowledge and the peace, we get more self-confident. As we get self-confident, we just believe ourselves and we're not going to listen to anyone else, not take much interest in other people anymore. We just become sure of ourselves, our own views, our own experience, and that can lead to a problem when one's actually supporting the ego and all the kilesas that go with that. Whereas if one's established in this sense of respect for Dhamma Vinaya, it's something higher than one's own views, one's own preferences. Once established that from the beginning, then it's a protection from this arising of over self-confidence and being one who just doesn't listen to anyone else. So it's very important to establish oneself in the beginning in that respect for the teacher, respect for Dhamma Vinaya, and that will protect you through your practice. The Buddha respects the Dhamma. He didn't say anything as on the level of self, ego, preferences. It was always the Dhamma is the highest. Even the Buddha has the Dhamma as the highest, so we certainly
in Melbourne today, there are a lot of meditation classes. In my office, there are people just go to meditation because they want to find peace, they want to find calm, and they go to meditation. And then, like I said, I'm afraid that I don't know what will happen to them when the meditation are too strong. We have good support of just
There's a danger of not having a teacher or a system of training Dhamma Vinaya. So as one meets with different experiences in the course of one's meditation development, one won't have any reference point, one won't have any way of really judging or gauging how to deal with it skillfully. So say one might have visions arise, one might attach to that something good or even the best. The sense of self arises around that. There's no letting go of self. It's just actually creating more of a sense of self based around the results or the experiences of the practice. It's very easy to get deluded, lost, if there's no teacher or there's no system. Dhamma Vinaya is a whole system of training. So that's again it's a protection against that. If one has a teacher, one can go and consult a teacher, or people more experienced who one respects, one goes to them, one will be giving up this sort of sense of self that will form around the experiences of practice. One will listen, one will get advice, will know how to treat them well to help them let go. So the result of practice ends up letting go. It's not building up an ego out of one practice, letting go of what you want. That's a peace of life. The question was, what do we do if the teacher is teaching us wrongly? And then well, you have wisdom. You still have to be able to contemplate the teaching you receive. If you're in doubt, well, you can get a second opinion. You can compare with other teachers, or you said, well, go back to the Buddha and go back to Rinpoche, who are our sort of Rinpoche is the modern founder of our position. The Buddha also. See what this teacher is teaching is that the Eightfold Noble Path, does it fall within that, and the Four Noble Truths, and then see, does it follow what Rinpoche said? We don't have to doubt about Rinpoche. Many of us have lived and trained with him. We respect him as an arahant. His bones turned to relics. We can go and see them in the Teddy. His hair become relics. Even his excrement became relics. So we have no doubt he was an enlightened teacher, so what he taught is a very good comparison to anyone else's teaching, and you compare what they say to what Rinpoche said, and it doesn't match. It's different. Well, that's a sign perhaps that our teaching is right. Says in practice you have to find the right balance, or the right amount, or the right level. Meaning you don't want to be going ahead of your teachers or stepping over them or being too high or too big in front of your teachers or in comparison to your teachers. You also don't want to be too low, aiming too low or thinking of yourself too low, because that can be an obstacle. So I gave the example of a stick. You don't want to stick that's too long. I didn't hear it, but it could be like, say, if you're getting a piece of fruit off a tree, a stick is too long, you can't reach it. If it's too short, you can't reach it. You've got to get the right length stick. Something like that. You have to find the right balance in the practice.
Didn't the Buddha say that? And I mean, about Vinaya it's not a big problem. It's not a big deal. But if a wrong view teaching, that is a really big problem.
You just saying matters of Vinaya like this are dealt with in this way. There's a process, a system where monks or monasteries are deviating from the norm of Vinaya they're dealt with. Or if they're deviating from right view in their teaching, matters of Dhamma, where wrong views are being taught and practiced. That also there's a process for dealing with that. Over the years there have been times when monks issues have come up, and the same as the order had to deal with teachings, wrong views and so on as well. It can be dealt with.
Could Ajahn Anan give advice about what kind of practice is suitable to handle the sensual desire and sensual seeking, that sort of thing?
Lots of contemplation of the body and practice of mindfulness of the body, particularly mindfulness of all the body, not just the superficial look at the internal organs, body parts, aspects of the body, and the pleasure we seek in the body, contemplating the 32 parts of the body and the asupa, the unattractive side of the body, countering that pleasure seeking from the desire for bodily contact with sight, sound, taste, smell. So he gave, for example, when you go to the toilet, before you flush, look at your poo, your excrement, and you ask yourself, is that beautiful, is that attractive, is that delightful, something to delight in? That kind of reflection just done regularly with mindfulness, those kind of reflections are very good at countering sensuality and all the kind of sex desires we have.
What about like sensual stimulation, like vision, hearing, like music? Different aspects. One, for example, sight. Just contemplate the unattractive aspect of that sight. If you see a sight that's pleasurable, you tend to focus on the pleasurable aspect of what you see. Bring up any unpleasurable aspect of it. Recollect that, focus on that with your mind if there's some unpleasant aspect, just to counter the seeking of pleasure. If it's sound, you're seeking pleasure from hearing music, for instance, contemplate the impermanence of that pleasure. You have pleasure as long as you're hearing that music and the conditions are right, you're enjoying that music while you get pleasure. As soon as the music stops, or even the conditions change while you're hearing it, or the pleasure stops as well, the pleasure disappears. Contemplate that, the impermanence of pleasure, pleasurable feelings. Contemplate the uncertainty of it all, the whole process of desiring something, trying to get pleasure, can't keep it, can't hold on to it for very long, disappears. Contemplate that with mindfulness, and it leads to a sense of weariness with that pleasure seeking and the uncertainties of pleasure and the fact it doesn't last very long.
It feels like a wrench for the heart, where the heart feels like it's too much of a feeling wrenched out of it. You can see it when you see something pleasurable, or you hear something pleasurable, and you can feel, this is okay, this is enjoyable, but you have the knowledge to say, I should just be observing it as a sound, not as something pleasurable, and the heart's feeling wrenched because of that. Should one continue with it, or should one maybe come back a bit? Where's the balance?
If you do, say, you practice and you're seeing the mind get wrenched, you're contemplating, don't do anything other than just watch what's going on.
You don't have to contemplate a lot at that time, just observe the whole thing with mindfulness. Even the feeling of being wrenched or whatever, you don't have to add to it or increase that contemplation. Just observe the feeling, observe the mind until that experience, that period of experience of change is finished. Then maybe later on you can review it and contemplate again, that's impermanent. That attachment I had for that sight, that sound, it's impermanent. Look at what happened to the heart, felt wrenched at that time, see how impermanent it is. You can review that later. But at the time, just be mindful. You can just gently be mindful of the whole process and don't do anything extra or special, just watch it.
I think the interesting question come up if let's say you have a sense, desire for something that is not just sexual or the body, but if you let's say music, movies, news, whatever, design, even beautiful nature, if you contemplate the body, does that affect that kind of desire effectively, or is that too oblique to get a good result?
First, you said you can contemplate the body, and it will affect all senses, every form. Because you might contemplate this impermanence, the fact that we've got to die, and therefore every sense desire we can follow is impermanent. But then he also said, or you can just contemplate if it's other kind of sense desires like nature or things, just try and find the Dhamma in that sense experience. So he said if it's, say you're looking at a waterfall, isn't this beautiful, this nice nature, so we'll try and bring it into your heart like Dhamma and say, well, it's beautiful, but it's water, it's always flowing, constantly flowing from high down to low. It's constantly this movement, it's impermanent, change, never fixed. And just try and find some Dhamma in it, and that will have a sense of detachment.
But the question is, doesn't that lead to this whole proliferation of monks reading newspapers and finding the Dhamma in all these really cool things? Which, yes, it happens to some degree, but also it brings in a whole lot of restlessness. And how trustworthy is that kind of, content?
It's more of a Vinaya question, more of a Dhamma question.
No, I mean it really purely as a Dhamma question. Yeah, like how does that affect it? If you tell yourself, I'm reading the newspaper in order to get this enchantment from the world, how well does that work? Like, isn't that a bit of a dangerous game from a Dhammic point of view?
And with these things, it's a matter of strength, particularly wisdom, but mindfulness as well. Strength of one's practice, strength of one's mind. If one has to look at the results, if one does say, look at the news, watch a movie, read a newspaper, or these kind of things, if one's practice is already a bit weak, well, these things will always lead the mind downwards because one doesn't have enough wisdom, one is drawn into them, lead to more mental proliferation. If there's enough wisdom, one has a lot of wisdom, one can still contemplate these things. Sometimes it's necessary to know a bit about the world, what's going on. But it's a matter of you have to look at the results and be very honest with that. And the reason we have precepts is to protect against the mind becoming weaker and weaker by indulging in more things that are just going to distract it and take away mindfulness.
People often say that it's good to know a bit about the world. Why is that?
More a matter of one's position. If one is practicing to develop samadhi and wisdom and insight, then these things are not necessary at all. You just said maybe if one is in a position that one, these things maybe can support one if one has know a bit about the world because of one's position, one's worldly position, or maybe one might have some interest in the news or whatever. So he looks at a paper maybe for about 5 minutes, just gets the important news like, is it going to rain today?
even that sometimes not true.
It's quite good for health matters, knowing ways to deal with health issues, what health issues are coming up, ways to deal with them, things like that.
In the monks' world, people talk a lot about buildings and where people go and things like that. What is it? I think about that, like just like news or like also in comparison at monastic kind of chatter. Is that harmless or is it even good to build kind of?
The chat about it or the building itself? So the chat about it.
Yeah, I like the talking. They take up so much of monastic talking time. It is kind of basically empty chat. And the question is that harmless or is it building good relationship or is it just worse than reading a newspaper?
As long as you maintain mindfulness to talk about such issues as like, have you finished building your toilet block yet? Then there's no real problem. The thing to do is always maintain mindfulness, not get caught into liking or disliking in this conversation that you might be having about a building project or the state of a monastery or whatever. And when he was a young monk, then he used to think like this. When senior monks meet, he used to think, maybe they'll start talking about some good Dhamma and I'll listen. But they usually talk about fairly mundane things. What are you building in your monastery? How big is the sala? What kind of metals you use in the reinforced concrete? Things like that. So you think, this is not what I want. I just want pure Dhamma. I just want to practice Dhamma. I don't want to hear about all this. But as he grew in age and responsibility, running a monastery, he himself had to start building. So now he's able to talk about it and understand what they're talking about, and he understands the reason, and that it is part of our life if you're a senior monk. But you just learn balance in this. It doesn't necessarily have to disturb your meditation. And when the time comes, if people come and ask Dhamma, well, he's quite happy to talk Dhamma and he appreciates that. But you can also talk about building with other senior monks if you meet them. That's not a big distraction either.